I knew I was already dead the moment they printed the team photo without me. 20 years of blood, weekends, and broken dinner plans, erased with a single glossy page taped to the kitchen fridge. The executive leadership team stood in a fake laugh pyramid at the annual offsite, all coordinated navy suits and toothy grins, and in the middle, Daniel Krell, our new CEO, a man whose claim to fame was torching a fintech startup so hard it became a cautionary tale in grad schools. And right next to him, where I should have been, was Marla from marketing, holding a champagne flute like it was a damn Oscar. I stared at that photo for a good minute, longer than I should have. Then I smiled, quietly, because if I'd learned anything in 2 decades of operational warfare, it was this. When they try to erase you, make damn sure you're the last thing they forget. But hey, before I take you down the desert road to a $150 million reckoning and a boardroom implosion you'll want popcorn for, do me a favor. If you're one of those 90% listening without subscribing, smash that button. Toss a like too. It keeps this story train running and gives our small team a reason not to cry into their lukewarm coffee. Now, back to the fire. When I joined Archway Dynamics, it wasn't Archway Dynamics. It was just Archway, and we were 6 people in a strip mall between a vape shop and a dog grooming salon. I ran logistics, client onboarding, vendor ops, you name it. We duct taped processes together, hand-sorted POS, and pulled 2 a.m. all-nighters because FedEx botched a cross-state shipment, and we promised a contract would be live by morning. Back then, the founders were scrappy, caffeinated visionaries. Not perfect, not polished, but loyal. We built everything from scratch, and every win felt like a win. Stock options were handed out like candy. I didn't care. I never planned to cash them. I was here to build something to matter. Years rolled on. We got our Series A, then B, then D, new logos, new suits. The strip mall became a glass tower. I still parked on the same level, brought lunch from home, and trained every new hire who wasn't too hungover to show up. People came to me when the tech failed, when the numbers didn't add up, when the warehouse caught fire. Not because I had a title, because I knew how to fix it. I was chief operating officer for 9 years, not the loudest voice in the room, but the one that got shit done. Until Daniel arrived. He came in like a glossy hurricane. Clean teeth, tight blazer, and a vocabulary full of buzzwords that made the interns swoon and the VPs nod like bobbleheads. Pivoting to data-led transformation, he said on day one, as if the rest of us had been doodling in crayon this whole time. He shook hands with everyone but me. Called me Lois once in an all-hands. I corrected him, twice. Within weeks, I was being looped out of leadership meetings. Project budgets I'd built from scratch were reassigned under new direction. My seat at the strategic table? Gone. Replaced by people who quoted Reddit threads and called that insight. I didn't complain, I asked for clarification. I got HR speak. We're realigning to reflect modern competencies. Whatever the hell that meant. My calendar got emptier. My Slack mentions dried up. The interns stopped asking for advice. One even said, "Didn't know you were still here." I laughed, pretended it didn't sting. But what gutted me wasn't the disrespect. It was the betrayal. Because when the founders cashed out during Series D, they told me hand to God. I'd always have a place, that I was Archway. Turns out loyalty doesn't scale. My husband said I should quit. My daughter offered to help polish my resume. But I wasn't ready, not yet, because I had one thing Daniel didn't: history, and history's a hell of a weapon when wielded right. Then came the day he summoned me. Alone, no context. Just a calendar invite titled Strategic Transition Planning. And just like that, I knew. Guillotine doesn't always come with sound. Sometimes it shows up as a PPT and a too bright smile. "Lauren, thanks for coming in. This won't take long." That's how Daniel started it. No greeting, no eye contact, just the smug cadence of a man who'd practiced this exact speech in front of a mirror while exfoliating. The conference room was already set. 2 waters, a branded folder, and an HR rep named Angela whose eyes darted anywhere but mine. A single projector flickered against the wall, and on it was a slide titled Strategic Realignment for Future Readiness. No bullet points, just that, big and blue and sterile. Daniel leaned back in his ergonomic throne, fingers laced together like some discount Bond villain. "We've taken time to reassess our leadership composition," he said, like this was a goddamn casting call. "And we've identified areas where fresh perspectives are crucial to continued growth." Fresh perspectives? That was the poison dart wrapped in HR bubble wrap. I'd given 2 decades to this company, led us through failed software rollouts, union standoffs, 2 recessions, and a warehouse flood that nearly shut down our East Coast ops. But now I was stale, outdated, a rotary phone in a world of apps. I glanced at the next slide before he could click it. My name, Lauren Hess, Transition Strategy Overview. Below it, in smaller font, effective immediately. Angela slid the folder toward me. Her hands were shaking. Daniel cleared his throat like he'd just delivered a eulogy. "This package reflects our gratitude," he said, already reaching for his phone. "You'll find it fair." Fair. There's a word that needs to be put down behind the barn. I opened the folder. Severance. NDA, benefits continuation. And a beautifully worded clause that basically translated to, "Go quietly and don't tell anyone we kicked you out like expired yogurt." I looked up. Daniel was typing, didn't even fake sympathy. Just tap, tap, tap like my erasure was a line item on his to-do list between latte and LinkedIn humblebrag. I stood up. Angela, I said softly, can you let me walk myself out? She blinked. I think I'm supposed to, I'm asking. She paused, then nodded. Daniel didn't look up. I tucked the folder under my arm and walked out the same hallway I used to own. The one where I'd once high-fived engineers pulling all-nighters and comfort interns after client calls went south. Now it felt hollow. The lights too bright, the silence too heavy. The elevator ride down was surreal. A few people saw me, some nodded with confusion, others didn't notice. But when I hit the lobby, Sarah from payroll ran up. Lauren, what? She started but stopped when she saw the folder. Her face crumpled. She hugged me, said something about how this place wouldn't be the same. I just patted her back and smiled, told her to get back to work before Daniel added her to the next slide deck. Outside, the sunlight hit different, harsh, judgmental. I stood on the curb for a moment, folder pressed to my ribs like a shield. I could have cried, I didn't. Instead, I went home, poured a glass of wine that hadn't been touched since Christmas, sat on the back porch and reread every line of that severance agreement while the neighborhood kids screamed and chased each other in Halloween costumes that were a week too early. The check was generous, crafted to buy silence to smother bruised pride in dollar bills. But as I stared at it, something inside me settled, not in defeat but in clarity. I folded it neatly, tucked it back in the folder, and slid the whole thing into the kitchen drawer under the expired batteries and birthday candles. Let Daniel think he'd won. Let them all believe I'd ride off into obscurity with a forced smile and a cashed check. Because what they didn't realize, what he didn't even bother to ask, was that I never worked at Archway for the paycheck. I worked for what we built. And some of what we built still had my name on it. No, I wasn't going to fight. Not yet. I didn't touch the lockbox that first night, or the next. It sat where it always had, on the top shelf of the hall closet, behind the emergency lantern and a box of mismatched light bulbs we kept meaning to throw out. But 3 days after they fired me, I poured a second cup of coffee at 2 a.m., stood up barefoot in the dark, and pulled the damn thing down. It was heavier than I remembered, or maybe I was just feeling the weight of 20 years I'd tried to compartmentalize. The lock still clicked the same way it did when I first bought it. Back then, we were barely post-startup, pre-Series A, and the founders handed out share grants like party favors. You're a builder, they'd said, you should own a piece. I didn't ask for much, just options with long cliffs and longer vesting. The kind of thing that only meant something if you stuck around for the long haul. Well, I'd stuck around. Inside were layers of manila envelopes and printed PDFs, some yellowed at the corners from age. Each one dated, signed, notarized. I flipped through them slowly. The original founder grant, the option top-ups from 2011 and 2015, the dilution amendment I signed reluctantly during Series C, the reclassification memo during Series D that everyone else ignored but I'd asked legal for in writing. The deeper I went, the more the fog lifted. I pulled out a notebook and did the math like I'd always done it, by hand, tallying shares, post-dilution conversions, employee pool percentages, founder buyouts. Took me 2 hours and a second pot of coffee, but when I finished, the number was crystal clear. 11.3%. I checked it 3 times. 11.3% of voting equity. Not phantom shares, not restricted stock, real, breathing equity. The kind that gets you a seat at the vote, the kind that can block. I leaned back in my chair, it was still dark out. My phone buzzed on the table, a useless workgroup thread still lighting up with backslaps over Daniel's new vision deck. I turned it face down. There was a numbness at first, a dull ache like post-op pain that hadn't yet faded. But underneath that, focus. Cold, sharp, surgical focus. Because here's what they didn't understand, I wasn't nostalgic. I didn't want my job back. I wanted the truth to have teeth. I wanted Daniel's slick smile to freeze when he realized I was still in the room, even if he couldn't see me. And now I knew exactly how to make that happen. The next day, I called the estate attorney I hadn't spoken to since my father passed. Still keeping your files and binders? I asked. Only for clients who make it worth it, he replied. I met him that afternoon. We updated the documents, notarized the ownership disclosures, and he gave me a knowing look over his glasses as I signed the last page. Do they know you still hold this much? I shook my head, and I'm not about to tell them. He nodded, smart. When I got home, I was going to tuck everything back into the lockbox, but instead, I slid the documents into a separate folder, one marked pending. The next day, the email came. Lexitron. Not from a recruiter or some assistant fishing for talent, but directly from their general counsel. Short, vague, polite. Dear Miss Hess, we are conducting a review of historical equity holdings at Archway Dynamics as part of our due diligence. We'd appreciate the opportunity to clarify a few items regarding your past tenure and any continuing interests. No mention of Daniel, no pleasantries, just surgical curiosity. I didn't respond right away. I waited a day, then another. Then I wrote back, happy to connect. I've maintained all documentation. Please let me know your preferred time. I hit send, then shut the laptop. I wasn't grieving anymore. Grief is for endings. This was the start of something. The press release dropped on a Tuesday morning like it was good news. Archway Dynamics announces strategic merger with Lexitron to accelerate next-gen logistics infrastructure. Headline made me laugh out loud, alone in my kitchen, a mouthful of oatmeal turning to dust. Strategic, accelerate, next-gen. Daniel's brand of corporate poetry, grand, vague, and completely full of shit. I clicked through the article, coffee going cold in my hands. There he was, front and center, quoted like a prophet. This merger reflects the bold vision we've always had for Archway, scaling innovation through targeted partnerships. There were words about synergy, holder value, and something about unlocking potential. Nowhere in the four-paragraph ego parade was there a single mention of the people who built the damn thing. No logistics leads, no tech architects, no legacy team acknowledgments. Just Daniel smirking like he discovered electricity. He even used my old phrase, we're not just moving packages, we're moving trust. I'd coined that during our series A Pitch to Investors, back when we couldn't afford pens that matched. Trademarked it last year, never asked, never even told me. I closed the article and scrolled through LinkedIn. Every sycophant in a blazer was resharing it with hashtags like #visionary_leadership and #GameChanger. Some of the very people who'd cried when I was escorted out were now leaving clapping emojis under Daniel's post. One even wrote, couldn't imagine a better captain to lead us into the future. I hoped he got a stapler thrown at him. That night, I got a text from Michelle. She still worked in legal, though now she mostly reviewed contractor agreements Daniel didn't bother reading. He's making us all sign fresh NDAs. I texted back, why? He says it's standard for information hygiene. But he's rushing the vote. Board's meeting in 12 days. 12 days. That wasn't normal. Not for deal this size. Not without more internal review, especially with pension obligations still being calculated. Daniel was sprinting, not negotiating. I asked her one more question. You still have your old cap table copy? She responded with a single thumbs-up emoji and a lock icon. We'd worked together too long for anything more. The next morning, I dug out my own copy and started cross-referencing. Names missing. Pools restructured. Founder equity vanished, redistributed silently over the years. It diluted every active employee down to table scraps while quietly protecting a few senior shares like mine. From the outside, the company looked airtight. From the inside, it was hollow scaffolding braced with buzzwords and NDAs. Daniel's plan was clear now. Fast-track the merger, sell the facade, secure his exit, and let the rest of them mop up the aftermath. What he didn't know, what the board had clearly forgotten, was that dilution doesn't erase every voice. Some shares, if written right, don't go away when you're fired. Some are tied to foundational bylaws. Some have teeth, and mine, they had fangs, I called Michelle. They think nobody can block this, don't they? I asked. She sighed. They're betting that every old shareholder sold out or got pushed out, and anyone left is too small to matter. They're wrong, I said. You're going to fight this? No, I replied, staring out the window. I'm going to wait until the room's full, and then I'm going to flip the damn table. The line went quiet for a second, then she chuckled. God, I miss you, I'm not gone, I said, just repositioned, because Daniel might have had the echo chamber, the headlines, the hashtags, but I had something better, the math. The call came on a Thursday just after I'd finished alphabetizing the garage paint cans. Retirement does strange things to your sense of accomplishment. Miss Hess, the voice was calm, deliberate, East Coast, legal. Someone used to silence being a tool. Yes. This is Richard Mullen, General Counsel for Lexitron Holdings. I appreciate you taking the time. I wasn't aware I'd agreed to anything, I replied, walking inside, barefoot across cold tile. Fair. Let's say we appreciate your reputation for precision, and I hope to clarify a few matters regarding historic equity holdings at Archway Dynamics. He didn't waste time. That was promising. I poured myself water and leaned against the counter. I'm listening. He laid it out methodically, like an audit trail. They were conducting final cap table audits prior to merger approval. A routine double-check, cross-referencing vesting records, founder grants, and legacy clauses that might interfere with the clean transfer of voting rights. He didn't say it outright, but his tone hinted at unease. There was a crack in Daniel's narrative, and someone at Lexitron had found it. I believe you were awarded early-stage equity with voting privileges that may not have been subject to later restructuring. That's correct. And to your knowledge, have you divested, transferred, or modified those holdings in any way that would affect standing? No, they're intact. I filed updated records with my estate attorney, and I have original documents, signed, notarized, and countersigned by Archway's original legal counsel. A pause. Would you be willing to share those documents with our team for verification? I already had a PDF prepared, I said. I opened my laptop, clicked a folder labeled Leverage, and dragged the files into a reply email. Within 2 minutes, it was sent. Thank you, he said. We'll review this with our internal compliance team, but I have to say, this clarifies quite a bit. Another pause, then casually. Too casually, our executive leadership will be announcing the merger at a retreat next week. It's largely symbolic at this point, but we believe transparency matters. You may wish to attend. Attend, I asked. As what exactly? He exhaled, the way people do when they're trying to sound nonchalant about a grenade in their lap. Let's say, as an observer. It's not an open invitation, of course, but your presence wouldn't be challenged. I let that hang for a moment. My heart beat once, twice. Is this something Daniel requested? I asked. There was a faint chuckle. I don't believe Mr. Krell is aware we've contacted you, which told me everything I needed to know. Daniel thought the path was cleared. He thought every old shareholder had been steamrolled into irrelevance or lulled to sleep with stock options and HR platitudes. He thought the only voices left were the ones he allowed into the room. But now the buyer, his buyer, was asking me to come watch him dance. I didn't need a microphone. I didn't need to make a scene. All I had to do was exist in the right seat at the right moment, and the entire illusion would flicker like a bad projector. I'll attend, I said, keeping my voice steady. Very good, Mullen replied. We'll forward the event details and coordinate logistics. If you have any additional documentation that might assist our compliance officers, feel free to include that as well. I think you've got everything you need. Excellent. One last thing, Miss Hess. Yes, I read through the 2009 cap amendment you sent. That clause you retained, the one about unanimous vote thresholds for post-Series D merger activity? Yes, remarkably specific. Most people wouldn't have caught it. I smiled just a little. I wasn't most people. The call ended. I sat there for a long time in the kitchen, still barefoot, listening to the hum of the fridge and the tick of the wall clock. Daniel had stripped me of title, status, and calendar invites. But he hadn't touched the one thing that mattered most, my voice at the vote. And now? He'd invited the buyer to his own coronation, unaware that someone had slipped cyanide into the champagne. I wouldn't need to raise my voice, just raise my hand. The retreat was in Arizona, some luxury resort carved into red rock like a Bond villain's vacation home. It had the usual trappings: infinity pools, Zen music humming from hidden speakers, desert air so dry it felt like your skin was being gently peeled off. Corporate retreats love these places. Isolate everyone, bake them in sunlight and optimism, then feed them keynote speeches and overpriced salmon until they start believing the bullshit. I arrived late on purpose. The main strategy session was already underway when I walked through the glass doors, heels silent on imported stone tile. I wore black, not funereal, just sharp, understated, like a warning sign with the words scratched off. The front desk girl gave me a program smile and a name badge. Lauren Hess guest, no company title, no credentials, just that, guest, perfect. I walked past a group of mid-level managers trying to guess how much Daniel's exit bonus would be. They didn't recognize me, or maybe they did, and didn't know what to do with the ghost in their midst. The main ballroom was theater style, dimmed just enough to hide expressions, but lit enough to broadcast ambition. On the stage was a wide screen flickering with graphs that didn't mean anything and mission statements that meant even less. Unified acceleration through cross-sector synergy. I'd heard better slogans from gas stations. I slipped into the back, standing for a while before finally sliding into an aisle seat. Heads turned, not dramatically, just flickers of confusion, half-formed whispers. I caught one name muttered like an urban legend. Hess? Daniel was already on stage. He was mid-pitch, hands moving like he'd studied Steve Jobs' videos on mute, voice smooth and caffeinated. Lexitron logo glowed behind him, and next to it, $150M path forward in bold white letters. He saw me, only for a second, but it was enough. His speech stuttered, just the briefest skip like a record scratch under the surface. His gaze swept over me like I was someone's plus one who wandered in from the golf course. He didn't acknowledge me, didn't pause, but his left hand twitched just once before returning to his pocket. I said nothing. Need to? I simply sat there and watched. The room applauded things that didn't deserve applause. Lexitron's COO got up and said words like alignment and agility, while a woman in the front row wiped away what might have been an actual tear. I watched it all, memorized the timing, waited for the moment when the script would break. Then came the final announcement. The Lexitron CEO, a tall man with a voice that could command both courtrooms and kindergartners, walked on stage holding a black folio and a champagne glass. The room leaned forward. He gave the usual preamble. Thanked the teams. Thanked Daniel. Thanked the lawyers, the silent backbone of every corporate power grab. He glanced toward Daniel like he was teeing him up for a final quote, the ceremonial handoff. Then he paused, just a second longer than necessary, and said, before we finalize the celebratory signing, I'd like to confirm one last vote still required under your bylaws. Daniel smiled, tight-lipped, a practice gesture, of course. The CEO scanned the folio, then looked up. His eyes found me. Calm, neutral. Miss Hess, he said, loud enough for every head to swivel, your vote is still active under the 2009 clause. Do you affirm your support of the merger under current terms? I stood slowly, walked down the aisle. Each step echoed against polished floors and held breath. I didn't glance at Daniel. I could feel his heartbeat spike from 20 feet away. I reached the front row, stood beside an empty chair, and said absolutely nothing. Not yet. A second microphone had been set up on a low stand near the front row. No one seemed to notice it before now, but suddenly every eye in the room was fixed on it, on me. The Lexitron CEO didn't blink. He just waited. A man who already knew the answer but was giving everyone the courtesy of hearing it out loud. A pause framed like a blade. Daniel shifted in his chair, palms pressed flat on the arms, knuckles whitening. His mouth opened, closed, then finally managed. She was fired. The room sucked in a breath like it was one organism. The word echoed, fired. And suddenly the air wasn't just warm, it was thick. Every smile wilted. The guy with the champagne flutes in the back froze mid-pour. A VP near the stage dropped her pen. The CEO didn't turn to Daniel. He didn't even acknowledge the interruption. Instead, he tilted his head toward his general counsel, seated stage left. The counsel adjusted his glasses, opened the folio Lauren had emailed days earlier, and spoke into his lapel mic with the calm of a man holding a grenade he'd removed the pin from an hour ago. Archway Dynamics Operating Agreement dated July 2009, Clause 7.4b designates that any equity holder possessing more than 10% of voting shares at time of merger must affirmatively consent in writing. There is no employment clause attached to this requirement. The shares in question, he flipped to the next page, are valid, unexpired, and enforceable. Miss Hess's vote is required. Gasps again. Louder this time, Daniel stood. This is absurd. That clause was written when we had 6 employees and a coffee maker that ran on spite. We've evolved. You changed the org chart, I said calmly. Not the bylaws. I wasn't yelling, didn't need to. The silence had done the heavy lifting for me. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost that remembered where the bodies were buried. His eyes flicked toward the board members clustered in the second row, then toward the Lexitron team, searching for support. For a script, for anything. Even if she holds legacy equity, he barked, that doesn't give her veto power. The Lexitron CEO raised a hand, not to silence him, just to slow the spinning wreckage. She doesn't have veto power, he said, but she has the ability to delay final execution indefinitely under your own agreement. And more importantly, her name's in the press release I haven't sent yet. He turned to me again, that same calm look. Lauren. May I call you Lauren? I nodded once. Just confirming your vote is in favor? I didn't move. I could feel the weight of every second I'd poured into this company settle in my chest like sediment. My voice was level, even no, not under the current terms. The Lexitron CEO didn't flinch. He simply closed the folio and nodded. Daniel's jaw twitched. You're tanking the merger? Why, out of spite? No, I replied, out of memory. He stepped toward me, eyes wide. Amend the documents. The board can convene a special session. We'll strike the clause you can't, I said. You'd need 2/3 of the voting pool, and you diluted everyone else too much to matter. The board members weren't looking at Daniel anymore. They were staring at their phones, checking numbers, flipping through their handouts as if trying to find the clause before it ate them alive. One of them, Wendy, who used to send me Christmas cards with her cats on them, finally spoke. Daniel, did you know this clause was still active? His mouth opened again. No words, just noise. The Lexitron general counsel stood. We'll revisit negotiations, he said to his CEO. But for now, this vote is invalid under current structure. And just like that, the room crumbled. People rose in confused clusters. The projector shut off mid-slogan. Someone whispered, "Do we still get lunch?" And somewhere in the corner, PR handler whispered into a phone with the urgency of someone watching a house catch fire in real time. Daniel didn't sit back down. He just stood there. A man with no company, no merger, and no narrative left. And I didn't smile because this wasn't joy. This was justice. Quiet, surgical, exactly how I planned it. I didn't sit down, not yet. The room had frozen in that odd purgatory where no one knows whether to whisper, shout, or pretend they're still optimistic. Daniel was still standing too, mouth twitching, eyes darting like a man trying to locate the exits in a house that suddenly caught fire. Lexitron's CEO looked at me with the same even expression he'd worn since the moment I walked into the room. His voice carried without volume. What terms would satisfy your vote, Lauren? The question was surgical, respectful, and dangerous because everyone in that room knew that if I answered poorly, it'd look like revenge, but if I answered with precision, it'd look like leadership. I took a breath. I'm not interested in killing the deal, I said, loud enough for the back rows. I'm interested in making sure the people who built this company don't get buried in it. A few heads turned toward the archway board. Others simply stared at me, quiet, calculating. I took a single step forward. I want 3 things, I said, holding up a hand. 1, a 10% equity pool carved out for legacy employees with more than 5 years of tenure. Non-dilutable, vesting upon close. 2 rows back, an older engineer I hadn't seen in years quietly mouthed, "Holy shit." 2, I continued, all existing pension contributions, paused or otherwise, must be reinstated retroactively from the date Daniel froze them. No restructuring, no rollovers. Same terms we had before he decided to gut the future of everyone over 40. And then I lowered my hand. 3, a binding clause in the post-merger agreement ensuring no layoffs for 18 months involving any employee earning under $90,000 annually. No exceptions, no loopholes. Someone gasped, someone else clapped, and then awkwardly stopped. Daniel took a sharp step forward. Absolutely not. Those conditions are unrealistic. They destroy the margin expectations. Lexitron won't, we accept, said the CEO, not even looking at him. Daniel froze. Excuse me? The CEO finally turned to face him fully. The room was so quiet you could hear the cooling vents above the projector kick on. You failed to disclose a critical shareholder. You concealed a material clause in your cap table. You allowed a voting structure that violated your own operating agreement. Now you want to complain about margins? His words weren't loud, but each syllable was a hammer strike. Daniel's voice rose an octave. She's not even employed here anymore. Neither are you, someone said. Everyone turned. It was Wendy, the board member. Her voice was calm but final. She stood slowly, sliding a folder closed in front of her. We'll be reviewing your severance agreement, Daniel, effective immediately. Daniel laughed, actually laughed, a short, broken bark that didn't belong in a room this formal. You can't, this is my company. I ran this. Wendy just raised an eyebrow. Yes, right into a wall, and that was the end of it. No dramatic escort, no shouting match. Just the final thud of a man being left behind by a room that had moved on. Lexitron's general counsel stood and addressed the room. With these revised terms on record and Miss Hess's pending vote, we'll reconvene the approval process within 48 hours. A revised merger agreement will be drafted immediately. This session is adjourned. The lights brightened. The hush gave way to chairs scraping, voices rising, hurried whispers. But I stood still, heart beating with slow, deliberate clarity. This wasn't victory yet. The ink wasn't dry, but the wheel had turned. And Daniel Krell? He was just another page in the ledger now. A footnote with clawbacks and a frozen bonus clause waiting to be litigated. As I turned to leave, one of the newer archway hires caught my eye. Young guy. Probably didn't know I used to run the place. He just nodded. Quiet, wide-eyed. Like he'd seen a ghost come back not for revenge, but for repair. I nodded back. We weren't done yet, but we were close. The signing took place in a smaller conference room off the main hall. No audience, no speeches, just polished walnut furniture and the persistent hush of high-stakes paperwork. Everything had been rewritten overnight. The equity carve-outs, the pension guarantees, the job protections. Every clause I demanded now sat in black ink on ivory paper, initialed, notarized, and bulletproof. Lexitron's counsel handed me the final page. This makes it official, he said, and the weight in his tone wasn't lost on anyone. I didn't hesitate. I signed my name, deliberate, clean, the same signature that had once been scribbled on warehouse leases, emergency purchase orders, and onboarding docs back when we were still just a six-person circus in a strip mall. I pushed the pen forward. There, I said, now it's yours. He nodded once, folded the document, and handed it to an assistant who vanished like a ghost into the hallway. Across the hall, Daniel was still trying to pretend it wasn't over. I saw him from the corner of my eye, pacing behind a frosted glass partition, while a board attorney whispered into his ear. His face was slack, no more smug calculation, just that blank-eyed dread of a man realizing the ground beneath him was never his to begin with. The lawyer's whisper ended. Daniel froze, his shoulders slumped. Then, quietly, a security escort arrived. There was no scene, no protest, just Daniel handing over his badge and phone like a kid giving up contraband at school. He didn't even look up as he was guided through the side hallway and out of view. The press release hit inboxes 5 minutes later. Archway Dynamics and Lexitron finalize merger with historic protections for legacy workforce. Below the headline, a quote from me. This company was built by people who believed in solving hard problems without forgetting who they were doing it for. These terms ensure that spirit endures. No titles, no job history, just my name. The quote ran next to one from the Lexitron CEO. Ms. Hess's leadership and commitment to equity, not just financial but human, made this merger possible. I stepped outside onto the balcony, away from the soft applause of legal teams and relieved executives. The Arizona sun was starting to dip, bleeding gold across the jagged desert horizon. I could hear cicadas, distant and rhythmic, like the sound of time breathing. Wind rolled over the rocks and rustled the pages of an abandoned notepad on a nearby table. I took it all in, not with triumph, with stillness. I had walked away when they erased me. Let them underestimate, let them forget. And then, when it mattered most, I'd reminded them quietly, precisely, that I'd never left. Footsteps behind me. Lexitron's CEO joined me at the edge of the railing. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, hands in his pockets, surveying the same endless stretch of sunburned earth. Then, softly, "Thank you, you saved this." I didn't answer right away, just nodded. Saved it? Maybe. Or maybe I just redirected it to a place worth heading. He turned to leave. I stayed, eyes locked on the horizon, feeling the last warmth of the day burn against my skin like memory. They called it a new perspective. But as I stood there, alone and unshaken, I finally said it aloud just once. For no one but myself, new perspective. I built the foundation. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.